My name is Victor. I am the occult technician, and this is Mind War. Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, we're going to pick up where we left off in the book Magic History, Theory, Practice by Dr. Ernst Schertl. We're currently in the theory section. We left off on page 61, the very last paragraph. Again, this is a book that supposedly was one of Adolf Hitler's favorite books. They found it in his library. It was one of the most read, had a lot of sections in his copy of the book were highlighted, and this is one of those highlighted sections, and it says this: our body represents an accumulation of potential and kinetic world energies and ranges on the way from the line of our ancestors to animal, plant, and crystal down to the beginning of all things. Okay, our bodies, our physical bodies, are the accumulation or a representation of the accumulation of potential and kinetic world energies that are, again, make up our universe, our cosmos. And it ranges on the way from our line of ancestors. So again, ancestry is so crucial. If there's one thing that you take away from the Mind War podcast, is the importance of your ancestry. If there are any people that we should be communicating with from the past, it's not a guy named Jesus Christ from someone else's story. It's not all the prophets and patriarchs of some other ethnicities' cultural stories. Stop reading them. Who cares? It's not your culture. I don't care who you are, unless you are a member of that particular tribe listening right now. That's not your tribe. That's not your culture. The people who wrote the Bible, they're not you, they're not your people. Stop reliving their history and worshiping their ancestors. Start to learn your own history. Start to learn the history of your ancestors. If there are any people that you are trying to communicate with spiritually, it should be your most recent relatives who have passed away, not someone's ancient relatives from some other tribe and culture that is not yours. Okay? Focus on your ancestors. Learn who they were. Go back as far as you can. Quit allowing them to wipe out your culture, wipe out your ancestry, wipe out your people's history, whoever you and your people are. My guess is that you are not part of them, okay? Whoever the they is, it doesn't matter. Whoever is on top, who is ever controlling the area that you're living in right now, if they're not specifically part of your ancestry and your culture and your people, why are you giving them so much of your heart and your emotions and your thoughts and all of this? Stop. Go back to your own ancestry, your own lineage. Learn your people's past. Okay? Because again, our physical bodies and the observations that we've made through them are an accumulation of what your ancestors did throughout their lives in order for you to be here at this very moment. In our body rests like sediment. In our body rests like sediment the whole past of the world, beginning with the first stardust. You are an accumulation of all history. Everything that's ever gone on in the entire universe throughout all of time until this very present moment, you are the result of it. Every prayer, every ritual, every ceremony, every magical practice that has occurred, every miracle, every outstanding, amazing event that has ever occurred throughout all of history, you are the result of it. Puts a lot of pressure on us, right? Since we are just the latest form, the latest iteration of human being, puts a lot of pressure on us, knowing all of history rides on our shoulders. And we are at a crucial time to understand that we are at the doorstep of what the future holds. And it's our choice right now, but man, is it going to be an uphill battle. Through our bodies flood the energies of the universe, out of the infinite into the infinite. They propel the mill of our being. What we call our soul is the sum of all world energies, all pasts of the world and the states of the world, which we darkly, emotionally realize. And again, there is a darkness. There is a heavy darkness that emotionally hangs over us when we realize the weight of history rides on our current shoulders. Because we look back at history and we see disaster after disaster. One manipulated mind after another being forced into the societal, cultural, and religious wet blankets that held them down the same way we are being held down today. And like I told you, while we were going through the Gateway Experience tapes, in the later realms, I believe it was waves 6 or 7, where we saw our ancestors standing in front of us, one after another. They showed us their faces before they melted away in front of us, right? That was the tape that scared so many away. Remember, we talked about other influencers and podcasters who said, I didn't listen to any tapes after that. That was too scary. Watching people's faces melt off, oh my God, no, that's not what I did. That rejuvenated, that reinvigorated me to listen to even more tapes, because I knew that my entire line of ancestry now relied on me to take us into the future. Not just physically, I've already done that. I've reproduced, okay? But now it's spiritually, emotionally, moving all of humanity forward. That's what we're doing now. Trying to get out of the muck and the mire of the dark ages. Now this next sentence, which carries on with this paragraph, I highlighted this next part, and it says this. This is the secret of the inside view. When the mystic closes his eyes and devotes himself only to the emotional perceptions of his inner self, that is to say, devotes himself to a certain layer of his body, then he is experiencing the whole infiniteness of the cosmic, which is resting in his body. That sentence again is that as above, so below. Understanding that we are stardust, right? I know that's kind of silly. It's kind of a cheesy saying nowadays. But we came from nothing. We will return to nothing one day. But within us right now is that infinite potential of the entire universe. Again, we are a part of all of it. Every little thing that you do matters. And there's a heaviness to that, right? That kind of butterfly effect. Everything that we do, it creates a ripple. It may not be a ripple that turns into a tsunami and makes massive change, but maybe it's just small change. Maybe that's all it takes just to get started, right? But as soon as he opens his eyes, again, he is confronted with a chaotic disorder of things with which he does not really know how to deal with. The combined view, the synopsis of world forces is easier by means of the inside view than the outside view. The old peoples, nevertheless, also possessed the deepness of the outward view. And on this double visibility rested our culture, their creative power, and last but not least, their magic. It's that paragraph talks about the difficulties that we run up against. Okay? When we take our inside view, we see the difficulty that it takes to transform ourselves internally as individuals. It's a struggle. It is equally the same type of struggle when we try to transform things physically. When you have to clean your house, when you have to remodel your house, hell, when you have to build a house, there is a ton of work that goes into it. You are taking physical matter, hard, concrete physical matter, and you are twisting it and shaping it into something new. Physically, you can see it. You can see the house being built. You can see the room being remodeled. You can see the room going from a state of dirtiness and disorder into cleanliness and order. It's the same thing that we have to do internally. And most people don't ever do that. We never put that work internally on our inside view of ourselves. But the struggle is the same. It's the same amount of work. The outside work, honestly, is so much easier. We think it's easier. We think the inside work is all dealing with emotions and stuff like that, which it is, and dealing with emotions are very difficult to do because you often have to learn a lot of truths about yourself that you didn't want to know. We lie to ourselves constantly about who and what we truly are. And stripping away some of those lies, it can be emotionally disturbing, but we have to do it. And when we do, we transform ourselves internally the same way we can transform things outwardly in our physical world. So let's go on. This is another paragraph that was highlighted by Adolf Hitler, it seems. It says this: that we who are living today do not really know how to deal with the sensory world, that it appears to be empty, dull, even oftentimes annoying, that we perceive our body as a prison of our soul, that we are consequently at best able for mystique, and only in the rarest cases capable of magic, is because of the extinguishing of the ability which all late times are lacking, and which consists in experiencing the outer world as an incarnation of spiritual contents. But only he is a magician who is able to inspire things and solidify the soul. All right. Today, we barely know how to deal with the sensory world that appears. It often appears to us, as the author here says, as empty, dull, or even oftentimes annoying. Instead of looking at the gifts that we are given in our lives, they start to become an annoyance in our lives. Am I guilty of this right now, folks? I have been. These last few weeks have been somewhat difficult in a way. So again, for those of you following along, I live with my father over at the WAR Manor. I live at his house now because he has end-stage dementia. And after my mother passed away, it's now become my responsibility to care for him. Not only am I caring for him, but I'm caring for my best buddy, Leo, my Boston Terrier. We are also caring for another dog who was my mother's dog. Her name is Lily. She's some kind of Chihuahua mix or something like that. She's an old lady, folks. She can be somewhat difficult at times. And she has been she's been a real practice in patience for me. And to be honest, I don't know if I've said this here on the podcast, but if there was anything that I could have redone about my mother's passing, it would have been, I would have said to her, listen, you got to take Lily with you. I can't look after Dad and the dog at the same time. I mean, we're figuring it out, but it's very difficult. She is a very complicated dog. And when you're dealing with a dog like that, whose main person is someone with dementia, it is often a lot of walking in circles, right? And so these last few weeks, I found myself, this is an ugly word, I found myself resenting the position that I had been in. And I had to really snap myself out of it. I had to say, hold on, Victor. Isn't this what you've always wanted? And folks, it truly is. For so much of my life, I wanted to spend time with my father. In my early days as a kid, he worked 12 hours a day, 6 days, 7 days a week. He spent months on, in other continents. He would go to Europe. He'd go to Asia. He went to Mexico quite a bit to build these giant factories, which now build cars that are sold back here in the United States, right? So I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him as a kid. And when we did, it was always working on projects, which was fun. I appreciated and loved that. He really helped me become the man I am today, where I'm very active. I love doing projects. I'm constantly working on something, right? And then, of course, as a young man in my 20s, I left and for the next 20 years lived in California, where I barely saw my father. But now I'm back home, and now I'm caring for him. I get all the time with him that I could ever ask for. But again, he has dementia. So it's very difficult. I don't resent him or my situation. Maybe I just resent the dementia itself. And then with that, with the dogs and the constant, chasing each other's tails, dogs are always getting in it with each other. And then when we have visitors, it can be very difficult. I had found myself kind of resenting the situation I was in. And I said, whoa, man, you've worked so hard to be where you're at today. You better fucking refocus. And that's exactly what I did. I kept telling myself, you need to be thankful where you're at and what you're doing, and get your head out of your ass and quit being selfish and feeling bad for yourself. That's no way to be. Okay. And one of the ways that we did that is just by continuing to work on different projects. Dad and I have been very busy, and he's been very complimentary and very thankful for the projects I've been working on. He's a great supervisor. He loves to watch. He keeps telling me how nice it is to watch other people do work around the house for a change. So that's been great, and that has kind of helped snap me out of it. But it's, again, where we have to be really careful about our mindset. We have to constantly be monitoring it, okay? All right, where were we? Okay. So again, we find ourselves in situations that can be often annoying. This is our life, right? We often perceive that our body is a prison for our soul. Again, I totally understand that, especially if you are someone who has issues with your physical body, I totally understand where it could be a prison. Even the healthiest of us find ourselves imprisoned by hunger and exhaustion and lust and all of those things that drive the physical body. That can be imprisoning in its own way. Having to eat every day and stuff like that. It can be very routine. It can almost feel annoying. We have to remind ourselves sometimes, be thankful that you even are eating a meal, right? Reset your mind instead of being upset with the physical body, right? It says, consequently, at best, we are able to be mystique. So that is having a little bit of occultism in it, right? Just a little bit secret. And it is because of the extinguishing of the ability which all the late times are lacking. So, as a society and a culture progresses, often in the beginning, it's very emotional when a new culture is created. It's filled with magic. It's filled with questions that need to be answered. But over time, as those questions get answered and things become more routine and more dull and annoying, and then we lose our capability in those late stages to have any form of magic in us. And everything just becomes repetitive and dull. But for those of us who are still magicians, we are able to inspire things and solidify the soul. Inspire things. Things are physical objects that are kind of on the outside. So those of us who are magicians, we are able to use our imagination to create things. Create things in the physical world. No matter what it is, no matter how boring it is, no matter how much engineering and all that stuff it takes, you are a magician for creating something. Because remember, the book has told us, even basic daily things that went on in the old days was considered magic. If you could put a few ingredients together and create a loaf of bread, that was a form of magic. And it still is today. Not only is it people who can create things in our physical world, but it's like we're doing here in the Mind War podcast, where we are solidifying the soul. We are finding answers through this work that we do here in the Mind War podcast that help us get a much stronger understanding of what our spirit is, what our soul is, the difference between our physical brain and our mind, our thinking consciousness, the difference between us unconsciously going about our day and being very conscious and present. These are all magical ideas that we are studying and learning here, and that we are putting into practice. So let's go on here, page 63 of the book Magic History Theory Practice by Dr. Ernst Schertl. It says the difference between soul and inner world and sensual environment or outer world consists only in that the soul represents a complex of emotional perceptions, the outer world a complex of sensory perceptions of pictures. Okay. It is not possible to draw an exact border between both areas, since spiritual emotional moments easily gain a pictorial nature, and on the other side, every sensory perception carries a more or less pronounced emotional tone, provided that it not only consists of an emotion, as is the case with the senses of smell and taste, and with various kinds of irritations of the skin. Okay. So, our soul or our interworld, they work closely with the sensual environment because, again, our senses are what we feel the environment with. That represents our outer world. Our soul is represented by a complex of emotional perceptions. We perceive the world and we respond to it with our emotions. In the outer world, again, is that complex of sensory perceptions. So we perceive the world through our senses, our 5 physical senses. We feel it, and then an emotion is created in order to represent that feeling. But these emotions carry with them a tone, a vibration, a wave, if you will. It's why we can say that the emotion of anger is represented by the color red. Red has a very specific frequency. It's one that we associate with danger because the color of blood is red. And when you see blood, it's often the result of an injury or something like that. That's what we're talking about. The multiple layers of things, okay? The multiple layers all working together to be symbolic and represent these different things in our lives. On the fact that emotional moments fade into pictorial perceptions, and on the other side, pictorial sensory impressions are associated with more or less strong emotional complexes, rests the whole phenomenon of the inspiriting of nature, which represents the basis of animism and demonism, and thereby of all magical aspects. When we take our emotions and we place what it feels like to have that emotion into a picture, into the form of a monster, into the form of an angel, we transfer the feelings of that emotion into a color. Any of those things, we are creating the pictorial representation of what that emotion is. That's demonology. We create these monsters to represent human emotions, the human condition. And that's how we've shared those stories throughout our ancestry, throughout our history. It is only until recently, like we've talked about here in the last few episodes, that psychology and psychiatry and all of these scientific ways of explaining the human condition and our emotions has come to being. And like we've said here in the podcast, both are equally important. It's very important for you to understand the scientific explanation and breakdown of your emotions, to make sure that you're not just losing grasp on reality by being too esoteric, by being too deep into your religion or whatever it may be, and not understanding the fundamentals of what you're doing before you slip into some real psychological trouble, right? But just knowing the academic side of it can leave it very sterile, very boring, no feelings, no heart. And that would make me want to give up. I'm not going to sit there and go to therapy every day if it's just going to be a scientific session. That's boring. That's why we add the spirituality to it too. You bring in some of that supernatural aspect, and that's where the emotions and everything can play into it. Gives it a little bit of mystique, a little bit of hidden quality. Just even if it's just a drop of not knowing. It's that drop that motivates us to know more, to search more, to have kind of this feeling deep inside that, man, there's something more out there for us. That's beauty. That's hope. I highlighted some of this next section here. It says, the magician has to possess the ability to transform emotions into things and to capture things emotionally. That's what we see with the art that I've done here. Through the emotional mess that I was in a few years ago, instead of sitting there crying in my beer at the bar or taking a bunch of pills and just staring at the TV or whatever it was, I allowed myself to feel those emotions. I allowed myself to process those emotions. I harnessed all that emotional energy and created the woodwork you see in front of me, behind me. I created the podium. I painted the walls down here. It was emotion that led me to do all of this that you see, to create this podcast. It wasn't monetary. It isn't my job. It's none of those things. It was an emotional process where, like I said here, as a magician, I possess the ability to transfer my emotions into things. And then, this is crucial too, to capture things emotionally. And folks, you are the things. You are the things that I am capturing emotionally. Again, the stories that I tell here are raw and real. And I share these very embarrassing stories with all of you to help capture your emotion. Help you understand that you're not alone in these feelings. That I felt them too. And so does every other human. Well, most of them. There's a lot of NPCs out there, I think, folks. But you're not alone. Through my stories that I'm sharing with you and the emotional aspect of them, I am capturing your attention. Not because of greed, not because of selfishness, out of need. I needed to do this. This was a requirement for me to share this information with you. I can't not do this. Not because I'm being forced by external forces, because internally I recognize that I have been given a gift with this information. And I feel an obligation to share it with others. And this obligation, again, isn't one that's like I'm dragging my heels and I am excited. This is an obligation I'm excited to have. The same type of way, or maybe not totally equivalent, but parallel to being a father. I'm excited to be a father and care for my children, right? It's not a chore for me. It's a privilege. Just like the privilege it is for me to be down here sharing this information with you. And we go on, it says, we explain this aspect psychologically with a so-called capability of projection. On the one side, and a strong ability to emphasize on the other side. Both are basically the same and are the result of strong inner body vigor and intense correlation between the various layers of the body sphere. These qualities are more or less extinguished with regards to the average modern European. And when he says European, you can basically think of the entire white race today, whether we're Europe, the Americas, or anywhere else where Western culture is. But they existed in primitive man and can still be found in that type which we call hysterical. That's right, folks. Let's talk about this again. These aspects of being a magician can be explained through psychology as the capability of projection. We can project onto things, right? So what is an example of this? Projection is in some ways a form of manifestation. We can come up with an idea in our mind, project it into the real world by building something. Okay, an example of that is for the last few weeks, I sat in the backyard, sat in the garden at the Mind War Manor, thinking I need to create or build or purchase a play set, a swing set for the Moon Princess, so she has someplace to play when she comes over. And now the Mind War Manor is the backyard, the garden area, very beautiful. I didn't want to just put a synthetic or artificial playground set that I could buy from Home Depot or Lowe's or something, right? They were very expensive, and it just looked like it would be out of place. So instead, we recently had a section of the wooden fence rebuilt. And so what I did is I went out and bought material that matched that fence, went on Pinterest and got all sorts of great ideas, and basically built a play set into the fence. I'll try to put a picture of it here for you. So I was able to sit down and visualize this thing, the capability of projecting. I projected this idea that I had in my mind into reality and manifested it, right? And on the other side, we have to have the strong ability to emphasize, right? Emphasize is the ability to communicate with others, maybe the ability to share with others the importance of a certain subject. Again, I'm trying to emphasize to everyone through the Mind Warp podcast that things like magic are real, but I'm trying to emphasize the truth about magic. It's more important for us to really say what magic isn't than almost more important to say what magic is during the podcast, right? And it says, again, many of these abilities have been extinguished in Western culture, but they existed in primitive man. But when we see it in today's society, we call it hysterical. Again, this book, we've been called psychopaths, and now we're being called hysterical. I wear those two words as a badge of honor. Let's continue on here. This is the final paragraph, page 63 of the book Magic, History, Theory, Practice by Dr. Ernst Schertl, and it says this: a certain degree of hysteria was always part of the magical man. But this type, who was in such a way burdened or gifted, was not always to be set apart from his folk comrades, as is the case today. Again, the hysteria, this drive that is inside the magical man is misunderstood today. Okay? But don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of the titles, the psychopathic titles that people are going to put on you through your work. Primitive mankind in its entirety was to a much larger degree hysterical than today's mankind. What hysteria actually is was first accurately defined by C.L. Shylock. And he goes on to say this: hysteria itself is not a disease of the nervous system. It is also not a mostly paroxysmal auto-intoxication of the organism generated by inner secretion of the body glands. Okay, so hysteria is not our nervous system or some type of chemical imbalance, but it is the perversion of the fantasy activity, a perversion of our imagination. Now, that does not mean that you're going to have a bunch of perverted imaginations, okay? It's not sexual perversion. I know the word perversion only in today's culture is really associated with sexuality. Perversion, really in what we're talking about here, is looking at anything in a different way, right? Looking at any concrete, already established structure and saying, how can we look at it differently? We're looking at it in a perverted way. We're using our imagination to pervert this structure. And when we do that, we see new opportunities for the structure where it could grow, right? There's an importance into that. Now, I highlighted this next section. It says, its being rests upon an abnormal penetration of the fantasy streams of the right cerebral hemisphere into the activity of the body tissue, which signifies an abnormality. Okay. The abnormal penetration of the fantasy streams. Okay. These perverted imaginations that we're having. Again, not a bad word. Perversion in this state is not a bad word. What we're talking about is we're using our imagination from our right cerebral hemisphere. Again, that sometimes that animalistic side, the darkness, the abyss in our mind. The right side of our brain is that artistic side. The left is the logical. So in the right side of our brain, where there are no limits to logic, there are no mathematical rules and stuff in the right side of the brain, we're able to see things that aren't real and that may never able to be real, but at least we can imagine them. We harness those things, and then we break them down logically with our left side of the brain and say, is it real? Can it be created? How do we do it? Usually to a lesser extent, with regards to a completely healthy human, the imagination reaches only the fabric of the body forms of the periphery. Your imagination normally doesn't go outside of kind of the things you already know and can see. You might imagine your breakfast tomorrow, like you can visualize it in your head because the last 4 years of your life, you've eaten the same breakfast every day. So you can easily imagine tomorrow's meal. It's different in this. It says the hysteria contains a metaphysical secret, which still needs to be unraveled, more peculiar and more miraculous than any spiritualistic occurrence, more intriguing than all appearances of occult procedures, which have been studied up until now. Also, more astonishing than all claimed or proven fakir exhibitions of the Indians. I'm not sure what that is. It is a real seat of magic and a temple of the Mayas, which willingly operates with appearances of ghosts, formations of horror, specters, and fata moranga mirages. Don't know what that is. Hysteria is a special case of the creation out of an idea. And I want to touch upon this subject because here we can discover the most illustrious examples of the transition of the subjective idea into the objective truth. Only your imagination can bring about manifestation. If you cannot hysterically imagine the changes, they will never occur. They will never manifest. They will never become concrete in the real world. People who are caught up in the daily grind, they love their procedures. They love their over and over and over doing the same monotonous thing. When you come at them with ideas that might break up their monotony and make changes into their very comfortable routine, they're going to call you hysterical. Do you see? Do you see it now? Do you see why that's being said? We think about, in the movies or something, you've seen women be hysterical about this, that, or the other. When if you really could sit down and listen to them, you could maybe hear stories of abuse or situations that they're in where they just can't take it anymore. And they lash out and society calls them hysterical instead of realizing maybe they're in an abusive situation, right? We look at someone who is being forced into, say, some type of religion where he is emotionally and spiritually being abused and he's acting out. And they call him hysterical for not wanting to put on the same robe and say the same, nonsense, humana every weekend or whatever. And someone who stands up against it and says, I don't believe in any of this bullshit anymore. I want out. This is terror. You are terrorizing the minds and spirits and souls of the people. They are looked at as hysterical because they stand up against today's cultural, societal, and religious norms. Not here in the Mind War. The Mind Warriors, citizen samurais, guerrilla gurus, and warrior monks, we are hysterical psychopaths who break away from the norm. And in a moment, when we return, we're going to go back to my magical journey over on Instagram at The Occult Technician, and we're going to continue on and see what I learned in the different practices in just a moment. All right, welcome back, folks. We're going to pick up where we left off on my magical journey over on Instagram at The Occult Technician. You can go to my page and you're going to scroll all the way down until we find a post from October 26th, 2022, titled Eligos. So during this post here, you really start to see the very beginning of the Mind War Studios, okay? So in this post, you see for the very first time that I put my sigil on the, basically it's being held up right now. Still, it's being held up by a 4x4 fence post that I built some legs at the bottom that kind of keep it balanced. And in this post, you can see that I had it here against the wall. I started to add some lighting. So I had some Christmas or some Halloween lights that light up the room. It looked like flames. I have a candle there. And again, this just shows the progression. In the second post there, you can see that I have a multicolored light changing. And what I really liked about this is the light was being blocked by my sigil here. So on the background, you can still see the circle of orange flame while the different colors were circling around it. And again, this was just another basic new moon night where I was pulling another card from the Goetia Tarot cards. That night I pulled Eligos, right? And I show the first picture of the actual setup that I do here down in the Mind War Studios when I'm actually doing my ceremonies and my rituals down here, okay? So that was an interesting post. Again, that kind of progression that I went through. So the next post on November 8th, 2022. Again, this was just the next full moon. I did 3 tarot card pulls. Again, I edited the picture to make it look like I had 3 left hands. Just, again, trying my hand out at something. I used very basic tools. I think a collage app is what I was using on my phone. Again, I try to keep all of my digital art as rudimentary as possible. I know a lot of it looks very rough, and I like that. I don't use Adobe or whatever it is and have AI do all this stuff. I'm not a graphic artist. I basically use Microsoft Paint, which keeps telling me that it's not even going to be available soon, that it's no longer being updated. I use OBS to record. And most of my video editing and stuff I do in a program called Wondershare. It was very cheap, like $100 and something bucks. So I try to keep things as rudimentary as possible, kind of rough and tumble a little bit. Again, I'm not here to try to be some polished artist, some graphic designer or something like that, right? So this was just another full moon pull. Again, started using some different lighting techniques and stuff like that. In the very last picture there in the bottom right hand corner, you can see little Leo. He's hiding on the rocking chair there. Now we're going to go to the post from November 23rd, 2022. And this, I believe, this is the first post where I actually started to communicate with all of you. You can hear my voice in this post. I hadn't quite made it in front of the camera yet, but we're going to go ahead and try to listen to this And what I'm reading here in this post, again from November 22nd, 2022, it's titled Bath In, and it's a new moon. The phrase that I'm reading in this post is one of my favorite phrases from the book Magic History Theory Practice. So this is kind of a, spoiler alert. We will be reading this again here shortly, but I wanted to try to listen to this if we can. Let's see if I can get this going here.
The demons demand the bodies, and the magician demands the demonology, and both find fulfillment in the communion of the sacrifice. The cosmic dynamic charge, which is created by demonic communion, molds the magician into a more comprehensive tool of the para-cosmic forces, so that finally nothing seems impossible to him.
Beautiful. Let's listen to it again here, folks.
The demons demand the bodies, and the magician demands the demonology.
Okay, so what does that mean? The demons demand the bodies. Again, the demons are representations of our human characteristics, our emotions. Our emotions demand the bodies. We are the bodies, okay? And through that, through the demons demanding a body to possess in a way, the magician can then demand the forces in the magic from the demons, okay? Again, demands maybe isn't the best word because we use communion here. When we commune with our demonic spirits, when we start to work with our emotions, they use our bodies in order to create things in the real world. Again, we harness our emotions instead of spilling them through addiction, through staring at the television, through taking pills, through self-harm, whatever it is. Instead of wasting and spilling our emotions, we harness them. And our physical bodies then transform those emotional feelings, those emotional demons, into something good, into something real in the real world. And in that, the demon and the human commune over the sacrifice. Now, what is the sacrifice? This is the word that everyone gets confused because of biblical talk of sacrifice, where you have to kill something else for your God. You have to kill an animal, human sacrifice, whatever it is, in order to appease the God, appease the demon, right? No. We are the sacrifice. We've talked about this before. Our old lives, our old way of being, that's the sacrifice. We are killing off our old addictions. We are killing off our old way of being, where we were too timid, where we allowed people to walk all over us, where we never stood up for ourselves. We're killing that person. We're killing that version of ourselves. That's the sacrifice. You sacrifice your old self to become something new. Do you understand? You cannot be both. You cannot still be the old person and become something new at the same time. There has to be a conversion, in incremental procedural changes till the conversion occurs. And then, and only then, when you harness these emotions through your communing over the sacrifice with the demons, will you be given access to the cosmic dynamic forces. So now you are in turn, you're going with the flow, man. You are now in concert with the cosmic dynamic forces, the absolute, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And then, and only then, will you realize that nothing is impossible. That's where you realize, when you become this new person, that whatever you want to do is out there. Of course, there's still limits. I get that. But it opens up your mind to a realm of possibilities that you thought were impossible at one time. Again, I had no clue that I was going to be down here making these podcasts, going through some of these very occult books that we've been told we're not supposed to even be reading. My meditation tapes, we were told we are not supposed to be listening to. Esoteric and occult movies that we were told that we are not supposed to be, getting to the bottom of and really truly understanding. We were supposed to just be, entertained by the lights and sirens, right? No. We break it all down, and now we're going with the flow. When I read through that, and when I started to really understand what that meant, it opened up a world of possibilities for me. And that was November 23rd. If we go through the rest of this post, this was the first time that I was sharing with you the practice of actually pricking my finger and getting one drop of blood and putting it on the sigil paper that I have with all the different 72 demon sigils printed on it. We talked about that before, how I go through that process and why I'm doing it. So this was, again, that first time of me showing you how I did it. And again, it shows the progression of the art. We see some of the art in the background as it was being created, okay? And so let's go through a couple more posts here. We're just going to finish up. This is the third episode I'm recording today. This is the final episode I'm recording for today, folks. So we're just going to finish up with a few things here. Let's see. It looks like our post from December 7th, 2022. Again, I use my traditional American flag triangle. I pulled 3 tarot cards, again, doing the tri-hand, the 3-hand kind of symbolism there. Very basic night. I show you there in the 4th image. I show you what I like to call Gen X Jello shot. That's my psilocybin skull that I make and consume. And this was a very patriotic day. I had my American flag handkerchief covering up my black mirror. And then a very cute picture at the end of that where I had a picture of Leo. And again, this was an example. This is one of the first images where, again, I'm really starting to show myself to all of you. Because, again, it took a lot for me in these early days to share myself with all of you. The idea that even back then, just over 3 years ago, not even 3 years ago, I didn't even want to share a picture with all of you. And now I'm here on this podcast sharing with all of you some of my most embarrassing stories, right? A huge progression, okay? And so let's see. We're going to, we're going to finish up today with this last post from December 23rd, 2022. We'll finish up the year, right? We'll finish up the year here in these next 2 posts, I guess. So this next post was from a new moon. We pulled the card of Paimon. Again, you can see that I'm testing some different light sources down here in the Mind War Studios. You can see my other art starting to progress. When you look on the 3rd image there, you can see the Paimon card. It's flashing colors very brightly. Again, what I did with this photo is I had that color changing bulb where it was fading from one color to the next. But when I recorded it on my phone, I did a time-lapse version, so it looks like the light's blinking very fast, even though in reality it was going very slow and changing from one color to the next. Again, this was my example of me learning different lighting techniques that ultimately led to what you see here in the studios and what you'll see in future projects, right? Again, just more very colorful depictions of Paimon. We talked about Paimon from the movie Hereditary. That was the demon that they talked about in the movie Hereditary. Go back and watch that movie and understand what it truly was, right? And now, in the final photo from December 30th, 2022. So we're going to round out 2022 here in this episode. This final episode, or this final photo, I am so proud of. This is the first photo where I really dove into my own art. And this was a picture that I had in my mind for such a long time. And I was so ready to make it. And it was so fun, again, kind of forcing it into being, because I did not know what I was doing when I was making this picture. And it ended up being very difficult and took a lot of time. But the picture you see here is in my living room at my kitchen table. There are 4 versions of me sitting around my sigil. So if we start with the version of me in the blue shirt, I'm kind of standing there, kind of, with a smile on my face, very excited to know that I'm at the beginning of something magical, something very interesting. This journey that I was on, I'd been at it for a year. I'd seen and experienced a lot of things that I had been searching for my whole life. And the blue version of me kind of represents that excitement of what I had found. The next one over, I have a gray shirt on, and you see that I have my eye covers on and my headphones. This was the version of me that was listening to the Gateway Experience tapes. Again, representing what I have to do in order to, be a magician, to do this work, right? The next one that you see is me in a green shirt. And I'm looking over my left shoulder at the version of me in my red shirt, okay? And the green version of me is looking at myself kind of with a look on my face of like, what are you doing, man? What's going on? Wait a second. Should you be doing what you're doing right now? I'm kind of questioning the other version of me, right? Because there's always going to be that part in the back of your mind going, should I be doing this? Should I keep going? Again, there is no fear here in the mind war, but you're going to find yourself in situations where you say, how did I get here? Should I keep going? And the last version, me there in the red shirt. If you folks see the book that I'm reading, again, this was back from December 30th, 2022, 3 years ago. I was reading the book Magic, History, Theory, Practice by Dr. Ernst Schertl. This image proves to all of you 3 years later that I am not some Johnny-come-lately. I didn't just find this book yesterday and start reading it on the podcast. I've been studying from this book for years. And the information that I found in this book and implemented in my life has truly been magical and has led to some amazing magical transformations in my life. And I love this picture because it's a future proves past type photo where you can see I've been at this for years, folks. I'm no longer an amateur magician. I am fully a magician now. Okay? And it started all these years ago. In this photo, again, it was me expressing myself, the journey that I was going through. It was really the first time where I truly put myself into my photography as this character. I don't know if I had come up with the Victor character yet, but this is him growing. This is him taking form in his different iterations, right? And this was very exciting, and it's the beginning of several other photos that we'll see in the next episode that kind of play along the same theme. So, folks, we are deep into it. This is like episode 14 or 15 of our magical series. We have finally made it all the way through the first year of my post, the first year of my magical practice. And as we continue through this section on theory, we're going to continue to see some of those rituals and see some of the groundwork that was laid for future changes that occurred in my life, including this one. So as I was reading through my red journal before this episode, over the last few photos that we looked at, right, that was months of work, right? I only post every 2 weeks. So if we look at 4 photos, that's 2 months worth of time. Okay, so we just looked at six different posts or whatever. So that was multiple months. And during one of the sessions where I listened to the Gateway Experience tapes, and I wrote it in the journal there, I had an experience where I was not just imagining, well, I mean, it was imagining, but I was visually seeing and feeling this overwhelming sense of love. In a very dreamlike way, I saw this beautiful woman with me. It wasn't something that I could see, but it was more of just being, it was like if this woman and I were fluid and we were just kind of, flowing into each other. This overwhelming sense of love and connection was there. And I remember at the time being so thankful for that, because it had been such a long time since I'd had that feeling, right, with this connection with another person. And I thought to myself, that was beautiful, that was wonderful. I hope that becomes reality someday. And when I look back at it, I now realize that was a vision of Callie and the Moon Princess. Not a vision as we see it, as if we're depicting something, but a vision where I was feeling it. All of my senses were active while listening to this tape, and I experienced time together with Callie, with the Moon Princess, together, feeling loved, presenting love to them. I didn't know it at the time, but I know it now, because now that they're here with me in real life, I've felt those exact same feelings. And that's an example of, through your work, you're going to be given little pieces, little flashes of what might be coming your way. And again, magic isn't like it is in the movies. You're not going to make a rabbit appear out of a hat. It's more subtle. It's more subtle in how it shows up, the results of your magical work, how it shows up in your life. You may be the only one that knows how to interpret it. And that's the beauty of it. That's why what we do here isn't scientific, maybe a pseudoscience, if you will, because we can recreate the experience over and over again. But the results, those are much harder to measure. I appreciate you being here. And as always, remember, folks, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.